Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the Music Behind the Magic podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Goodman, and as always, I want to celebrate with you the magic of Disney songs, scores, and soundtracks from the movies to the parks. I know we just came out with our regularly scheduled podcast this weekend, but I just had to put out this very special episode as soon as possible. If you've been keeping up with the summer movie news, you know that the live-action remake of Lilo Stitch has been the absolute runaway hit of the year. Building on the legacy of the much-beloved 2002 animated original, the live-action version takes everything people love from that original film and adds all new layers of emotional nuance and depth, humor, truly amazing acting, and a just ridiculously adorable CGI Stitch. And all those emotional elements are captured and enhanced by the incredible score by composer Dan Romer. I was so lucky to have the chance to talk with Dan about his work on the film, as well as his work on another classic animated Pixar film, Luca. But before we dive in, if you are new to this podcast and if you enjoy it, please like and subscribe and share it with a friend, family member, or coworker. You can also reach out to me with any comments, questions, or suggestions at jonathan@musicbehindthemagic.com. You can follow me on Instagram at musicbehindthemagic, or join our Facebook group to discuss and share Disney music news, thoughts, topics, and opinions. If you haven't seen Lilo and Stitch, you should run out and do it immediately to make sure you see it in the theaters. You should also buy or stream a copy of the soundtrack to explore or revisit the narrative power of the music and just how closely it ties into the story. So, I invite you to grab a Dole Whip or any tropical cocktail of your choice, put on your favorite Aloha shirt, and enjoy this very special episode of the Music Behind the Magic podcast. We are so excited to be joined today by Dan Romer. Dan is a composer, songwriter, and music producer based in Los Angeles. Dan's scores include the #1 movie in the world, Lilo and Stitch. Let me say it again. The #1 movie in the world, Lilo and Stitch, as well as the Pixar classic Luca, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Station 11, Beasts of No Nation, Atypical, Maniac, Death of a Unicorn, Woman of the Hour, The Promised Land, The Good Doctor from ABC, and Superman and Lois. In addition to his scoring work, Dan composed the music for Ubisoft's flagship video game, Far Cry 5, and has produced several worldwide hit singles, including A Great Big World and Christina Aguilera's Grammy-winning Say Something, and Shawn Mendes' best-selling single, Treat You Better. Dan, thank you so much for being here. What a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It is. Can't wait to have the conversation. So let's just start on a super duper high note, right? Lilo and Stitch, as I mentioned, the #1 movie in the world. It's approaching 800 million, soon to be 1 billion in box office sales. It's been out for less than a month, and it's already the third highest grossing movie of 2025. It's beaten Mission Impossible at the box office, Ballerina, and The Karate Kid for 3 weeks in a row. So first and foremost, congratulations. And it's a happy question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. How does it feel?
It feels amazing. I mean, it was such an incredible process working with Dean Fleischer Camp, the director on the film. And, we became like family immediately. And it's just so cool to, be sitting in my studio with him, for so long making this music and then see it go out in the world and have so many people see it. It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I want to talk all about the work on the movie because the music is amazing and so important to the narration of the movie. But let's start, if you don't mind, talk about you and your background. What's your musical journey? How'd you get to where you are today?
Well, I grew up, being in love with rock music. And I went to high school at LaGuardia which is the performing arts high school in New York.
New York. Yep.
Yeah, I went for singing. And so I was studying opera. I was like kind of training in opera, but the whole time intending to, make music more in like the Nirvana, the Pixies kind of space. But in that time, I was obsessed with music theory. and I started studying Bach chorales very
Hmm.
intensely. And so I learned this sort of classical four part voice writing, the soprano, alto, sorry, Jesus Christ. Yeah, soprano, alto, tenor, baritone writing, which then I, realized very quickly translated to orchestra writing for violin one, violin two, viola, cello. And it was like, oh, I already know how to write string quartets from or orchestra stuff from studying this Bach choral music. And so I started producing bands in college and starting my own band and writing strings for a lot of that stuff. And then this director, Ben Zeitlin, who I started working with through a mutual friend, heard some of the string work I was doing, and he said, "Oh, you can write strings and record it yourself. Let's start. Do you want to start making music with me for my short film?" And so I did his short, and then that led him to asking me to co-score his feature, Beast of the Southern Wild, with him.
Amazing movie.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
all throughout my 20s, I was producing like indie folk, pop, rock artists, and then wasn't doing a ton of film scoring. But then once I scored Beast of the Southern Wild, I was just so happy with getting to make that kind of music, to make this film music that I felt very emotional about, and I thought this would be a really cool trajectory to take my life. So I moved from Brooklyn out to LA, and I started scoring films out here, and that was my trajectory.
Amazing. And when you score films, it's more than writing music, right? It's writing music to tell a story. How did you learn how to meld the two together, not just be able to write great music, but write great music that helped advance the plot, bond to the characters? It's a lot of stuff going on. It's such an important part of the film going experience.
I think that it has to be plot character first.
Mm.
I think that you have to start from that place and then say, what kind of music can I make that can express the emotions of the characters and the situation that you're seeing in the film. I find it less exacting to say, let me make the most beautiful music I can make and then try to twist it in a way that works for the story. I think that music really should come from the characters and from the story and feel very bespoke to the situations that you're seeing on screen.
It makes a ton of sense. And you mentioned some of your musical influences. A little bit of rock, it sounds like. Were there any, so rock and classical kind of mixed both together to formulate your style?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely come from a rock and pop music background more than anything. But early on there were things that before I got anywhere near film scoring, I mean, like the Smashing Pumpkins song "Tonight Tonight," I remember hearing and being blown away by that combination of rock instruments and orchestra. And just being a huge Beatles fan growing up and listening to all the stuff that George Martin was putting over all the stuff, I mean, there's a rich history of classical influence on rock music, and when it came to time to do Beast of the Southern Wild, like Ben, the director, Ben Zeitlin, and I talked about the idea of not using any sort of outward rock influence. Because Ben and I both come from rock music.
Hmm,
Ben was like a huge Metallica fan growing up and still is. And a lot of the stuff that we do on bells, these like arpeggios, they're like da 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 kind of stuff. I mean, that comes from Ben listening to Metallica,
totally.
and we said we didn't want to have like drums, bass, guitar as part of the palette in that way. We didn't want to have it actually be rock music. We ended up actually, I don't think we used one real guitar on the Beast of the Southern Wild score. I think if I remember correctly, we did use a little bit of Nashville guitar, which is a very specific. It's the top six. It's like the higher of the strings of a 12 string guitar put onto
Yep.
a guitar, so it
Yep.
sounds kind of like it sounds different from how a guitar really sounds. But we were like, how do we make these sounds that we understand from being making rock music our whole lives? How do we now port that into this film score place? And so what we had discovered was that pizzicato strings were kind of our gateway. And it was like, okay, instead of having a palm muted guitar playing jun 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 jun, we could have pizzicato strings going dun thrum thrum, just plucking cellos. And so we were kind of just porting a lot of our rock ideas into how a score would work. And then had some, had a fiddler come play over a lot of it, and I played a lot of accordion and stuff that felt more, native to Louisiana over, because it's a film that takes place in Louisiana. Uh, Instruments that would feel more native to Louisiana over the music.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. Is that authenticity is also so important to film. So Louisiana for Beasts is Holding Wild. Let me also just kind of talk about Luca because I think one thing about your music it's very evocative, and I think that authenticity is so important to evoke those emotions. So Luca set in a Mediterranean Italian village, and you listen to the music and you see the movie and you're there. You're in that village. Talk about what it was like to work with Disney for the first time, especially since music is such an important part of that experience.
I mean, working with Disney on Luca, that was my first Disney film,
Yeah.
specifically Pixar. But yeah, I mean, I came into that film with them being very big fans of the Beast of the Southern Wild score,
Mm.
and they were so collaborative, and just we had so much time to kind of try different things, try different textures, and I spent a lot of time listening to Italian music before I wrote a note, which that's very important to me when I am doing a score that's going to reference a specific culture, to just inundate myself with the music. And you can learn to make stuff that sounds within another set of music by studying and saying, like, I'm going to figure out instrumentation wise and music theory wise what is different about this kind of music. But I really and that's effective to do at certain times, but I think the most effective thing to do is just learn by osmosis, to just make playlists, have your friends who know the music better. For Luca, I had two Italian collaborators, who who were actually from Italy. When I say Italian as opposed to Italian American, who made me playlists to listen to of Italian music that they loved. And then just doing deep dives on Italian folk music and finding stuff that was kind of difficult to find at times. Uh, you know, um, yeah, I'm kind of getting lost, kind of getting lost in my answer. But yeah, I
Great.
guess what I'm saying is working on Luca was fantastic. They're
Yeah,
an amazing team over there.
I do, and that's why again Disney music hits everyone different, which we'll talk a little bit more as well. But when you're kind of becoming inundated and becoming osmosis, and learning by osmosis, how does the process work for you? You hear the Italian music, you feel it, you internalize it, and then out it comes. This is how does the process work for you to kind of take in what you learned and put out your own original take on it? That again has to match the plot, has to match the characters, has to match the story.
Yeah, I think that's where the idea of osmosis really comes into play. It's like what you want is to be listening to a kind of music so much that it changes your instincts.
Mm.
And then when I just start writing something that I think is emotional sounding, regardless of whether or not I'm thinking it needs to sound Italian, it will sound Italian. Because I've just been so inundated with the harmony and the instrumentation and the way, what we call voicings, the way the spaces between the notes work, that I've just been listening to nonstop. It'll just come out in the writing.
Totally understand. So, you know, speaking of evocative and takes you time and place, Lilo and Stitch. How'd you become involved in the film?
Um, well, I met with the director, and when I first got the call, I was very excited about it because I just love the original Lilo and Stitch with all my heart. I've watched it so many times. I think it's so cool how punk rock it is, and what wild characters both Lilo and Stitch are. And it's not something that you see every day. And I love that movie so much, and it was just like so incredible to get the call. Um, and the director and I just Dean and I just talked a bunch about how we felt about the story, and how what kind of music we thought should be on the film and how it should work. And I think it was just felt like a great fit.
It is such a beloved movie over the past 20 something years. What do you think about it? The punk rock sensibility for sure, but it resonates. What do you think resonates with so many people over so many different generations?
I mean, I think that getting to see characters that are so wild and have this beautiful message of family to it, I think is the thing that feels so universal. um it's just such a heart-wrenching film, and it's such a tearjerker, and I think the emotions just feel so relatable and so real.
Yeah, I said to myself, to my family, I'm not gonna cry. It's not gonna hit me the same thing as the animated movie. And then sure enough, they point and they laugh at me when I'm trying to, just wipe away the tears very, 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 covertly during the movie. You can't help it. I mean, if you have a heart, you're gonna cry at least once or twice during that movie.
Jonathan, it's okay to cry, man. You can
It
do
is.
it. I
It
love crying.
I owned it. I owned it, and I wear it on my sleeve literally. Um, Alan Silvestri wrote the original score. For you, how did you approach the balance of, paying, homage to that versus bringing your own sensibilities, and your own musical vision to the new movie?
I mean, Alan Silvestri is, a master of his craft, and just his score for Lilo and Stitch is incredible. And they're, gigantic shoes to fill. And um, I thought that the best way to come at it was to just go through my process of how I score films, and you know to just think of it as a separate entity. And I really wanted to root the score in traditional Hawaiian instrumentation, and so that was sort of my starting point. I was like, I know that ukulele and slide guitar, and Polynesian percussion, and guitar, uh uh steel string guitar, these were going to be the foundation of where everything else would grow. And then when Dean and I started working together, and we got the idea for this male voice and female voice singing over a lot of the score, it kind of broke open a new layer of how this would work. We were listening to a lot of Hawaiian singers and their vocal technique and the way they sang, and it was just like, this is so beautiful, this texture, this very vibrato-y texture, is such a gorgeous texture, and it would be amazing to have this over the score. And we kind of like figured out how we would use it as we went.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of things, and thanks for bringing those up. So would love to circle back on some of them. Yeah, for sure. It's an emotional soundtrack because there's so many, it's all about Ohana, it's all about family, it's all about the ups and the downs, and the hardships and the love. But it invokes a lot of feelings. You have loneliness, you have chaos, you have tension, you have hope, you have love. And those choral elements are constantly, being used within those moments. It just elevates everything. What was the genesis? When did you realize that they could really be a force multiplier to just how much emotion is being conveyed during the music?
Well, Dean and I kind of were just listening to a lot of music together, and we heard some of these very vibrato-y vocals on some music we were listening to, and we were like, what if we just tried this kind of thing, and let's just see where it feel. There was, the very first thing we tried it on was that first scene, or it was, I guess it was the first, we did it on two scenes. It was where Nani is trying to get the car started,
Mhm.
and then right after that, while Lilo is waiting outside, after the big push during the hula. And you know we tried it on those things, and we felt like it was working really well, and then we kind of went forward and tried it on more scenes. And as we went, we realized where it was working really well was sort of over questions of safety and family.
Mhm.
And then and what we were ending up doing was one lower vocal and one higher vocal. And we kind of figured out as we went, it's like, this is sort of like the voice of her, the spirit of her mother and father.
I was just about to say it's exactly how I interpret it as being. It's exactly what it is.
Great.
100%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, we discovered that as we went. And then we were like, oh my God, we were doing this without 100% even realizing it. We went back through the score, and it's like, what moments can we use to sort of highlight this idea? And so in that, very early in the movie, when you see the mom and dad sign on the wall, the mama and papa sign, you hear the vocals come in over that sign to kind of direct you to that concept.
Yeah, it is absolute brilliant use of it for just that reason. It works on so many different levels, but definitely the spirituality of the parents helping guide them and keep them together came through a hundredfold.
Ugh, that's so great to hear. That makes me so happy.
Eh, And you also notice from an instrumentalization standpoint, there are a lot of different styles, within the soundtrack. You have classic sci-fi, you have drama, you have comedy, you have authentic Hawaiian music. What I heard and noticed was even over the more traditional, tension type cinematic scenes, there is slack guitar, there is nylon string guitar, there is that instrumentation. So you're able to juxtapose the two of them. It was very original and fresh.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the idea, is the first 7 minutes of the film, or maybe it's just 5 minutes. We use absolutely no Hawaiian instrumentation on the space station. We what I wanted it to feel like was that we have this sci-fi music, this like orchestral slash like more traditional sci-fi music over the space station, and then when we get to Hawaii, we hear all these Hawaiian instruments, and then as aliens come to Earth, we hear a meshing of those two things.
Yeah, it worked extraordinarily well. And with all those different styles, was it fun? Was it daunting? Was a little bit of both to try to kind of bring all those elements together in what winds up being an incredibly cohesive sound. Talk about the process for making sure it all worked, because it could have been completely disparate, but it wasn't. It was completely unified.
Thank you. That's so great to hear. I mean, generally in my work, when I almost never will make a score that's just an orchestral score, and all we have is orchestra, um, and piano, just very traditional score elements. I almost everything I've made has some other instrumentation happening that makes it unique to that film. I think just coming from a place of like, I said before that Smashing Pumpkins song Tonight, where it's like we have a rock band and that's the basis for this, and then we are going to put strings over it. That's kind of where I come at scoring from, where I'm like, okay, here's the guitar part. And like a lot of these action cues, I would start by writing a guitar part, and then sitting down and playing slide over it, and then putting percussion, and then writing the orchestra last. And the orchestra might be the main thing you're hearing because it's the fullest and the loudest thing, and the more traditional elements are a bit softer. But it almost always comes from starting with the more traditional instrumentation.
And from a Hawaiian standpoint, you mentioned, was it the same process with Luca? Like you kind of inundated yourself with Italian music? Did you inundate yourself with Hawaiian music? Did you get to go to Hawaii and spend some time there? I mean, for research purposes, just to make sure you got all the aloha spirit in there.
No, I mean, most of my research was just relentlessly listening to playlists
Yeah.
of Hawaiian music. And the thing that really affected me very deeply was the chants. Listening to the Hawaiian chants where it's like, a percussion and people singing over it
Yeah.
was just, learning those melodies and how those melodies worked. I mean, and when I say learning, I mean, you could spend years and years listening to that music and be discovering more and more as you do. But just getting the vibe and trying to get those melodic shapes into my head were so important for me for the melody writing.
Yeah, I think in general, Hawaiian music is just so incredibly spiritual. You're going to feel something when you hear it. It's just between the visuals of how beautiful it is and the culture and the aloha and the love that's felt. I just think there's something just so, again, evocative and special about Hawaiian music, and being able to bring that and weave it throughout the movie really just casts an incredible narrative.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, So looking back, this movie's going to happen. It was a big success. It is a big success. Were you nervous about anything? What were some of the things that kept you up at night when you were going through this process?
Um, I wouldn't say that anything kept me up at night. I mean, um, it was really a lovely process, and there were a lot of back and forths, trying to figure out the exact vibe in some of these moments. I mean, on a film like this, the music has a lot of changes, and especially in an action scene. Um, there might a cue might completely change every 15 seconds, and so there's a lot of movement and a lot of different options you can do in a lot of different ways, and you can highlight the moments. But I wouldn't say anything kept me up at night. It was really a beautiful process, and the team really felt like family.
Yeah, and the soundtrack is incredible. You can buy the soundtrack, you can stream it, and it's unlike the original soundtrack, which I think only had a couple of songs from the score. The whole score is on this one, and it's just great to hear. It helps you relive the whole thing all over again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love getting as much of the score out as I possibly can whenever I can.
Yeah, it's great. What what's next for you? I mean, coming off of this big, huge high, if you can talk about whatever's working on, what are you working on next?
Um, yeah, I've generally learned in life. Well, I don't know if learned is the right thing to say, but I've generally not announced projects until the last possible second. I kind of like playing things as close to the chest as possible.
For sure.
But what I have to remember to do is like film myself doing stuff on those projects so that when I do announce them, I have content to share, because I feel like if I was just announcing projects immediately, I would be like, making little videos of how I'm doing stuff. And I should just be banking those things.
Well, to that end, if people do want to follow you and learn what you're doing when ready, how can they find you? How can they follow you? How can they know what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as just Dan Romer. I have a website that's danromer.com, but I think the Instagram is the best for updates.
That's great. Well, I am so appreciative of you joining, telling the story. Congratulations on the success. It is well deserved. It makes so many people happy, and that's ultimately what music has to do. So I just appreciate you taking the time to talk about it. And I recommend that everyone A, see the movie, and B, buy and stream the soundtrack as much as you can, because it's going to make you feel good.
Thank you so much. It was so great to be here. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks, Dan. Talk to you soon. Best of luck with everything.
Sounds good. Thanks.
I want to again thank Dan Romer for his time, for joining us, and for sharing his process for composing his scores. Please see Lilo and Stitch in the theaters and buy or stream a copy of the soundtrack. There are a lot of differing opinions when it comes to Disney live-action remakes, but I can say that seeing this movie live revealed so many new nuances and emotional touch points that it was really like seeing it all over again for the very first time. The acting was great, the CGI characters were seamlessly integrated into the story, and I managed to both laugh, and I'll admit it, and cry several times. It is Disney movie and music magic at its very best. We'll have more episodes coming up in the next few weeks, so until then, as they say in Hawaii, a hui hao, which means until we meet again, and until then, have a magical musical day.